Next guest is a young comedian who's making his very first appearance on The Tonight Show. He's originally from New York City. Would you welcome him, please? Jerry Seinfeld. Jerry?
Weather reports are the same wherever you go in the country. They always have the guy comes out, he shows you the highs, the lows, the fronts. Then they show you the satellite photo. This is real helpful. A photograph of the Earth from 10,000 miles away. Can you tell if you should take a sweater or not from that shot? I have no idea. If I really need to know the weather, I watch Romper Room. The kiddie show. They lay it on the line. If the little Willie guy on the wall gets a raincoat, I know what's happening.
Jerry Seinfeld. Thank you, Jerry. Take a bow.
It was May 6, 1981, first time on The Tonight Show, and Johnny Carson gave him the okay sign, which is the ultimate for any comedian in those days. And Jerry feels to this day that appearance was the most important and most significant in his career. I saw Jerry for the first time at the Comedy Store in Hollywood. And after I saw him a couple of times, I brought in Howard West, my partner.
And I saw something very unique in someone that young. He was about 26 years of age.
Then he did a whole series of Tonight Shows and David Letterman. And I sent a letter to Brandon Tartikoff. I said, "Dear Brandon, call me a crazy guy, but I think Jerry Seinfeld will soon be on NBC in a series."
I didn't know that George Shapiro had written a letter to NBC to tell them that he thought I should be on NBC, which I didn't think. I didn't think anything. You know, I had really kind of decided I was just going to be a comedian.
I've been sending letters to Brandon for years. Every time, you know, he got a good review or a magazine article, I would send letters to Brandon. This time, it triggered a meeting.
The comedians always hate any meeting in the middle of the day. You always feel like, this is screwing up my whole afternoon. This was the whole reason I became a comedian, so I could be free from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. as a solid block of complete, you know, mall schmooze time. So I went to the meeting, you know, I mean, George had gone to the trouble of writing the note. I thought the least I could do was go to the meeting.
Jerry Seinfeld came in for a meeting with myself and Rick Ludwin, and Rick was our executive who was in charge of late night and specials, and Rick really felt that Jerry did have a unique voice, and he was scoring very, very well on The Tonight Show.
We basically said to Jerry, what would you like to do in television? Would you like to host a late night show? Would you like to do primetime specials? Would you like to do a primetime series? What is it, Jerry, that you would like to do in television? We'd like to do it with you.
And I said the only thing I ever had in mind was to have a meeting like this. This seemed like you were getting somewhere in show business, but I don't have any ideas.
He wanted to play basically himself. That's all he took out of it.
I found out later that he had been a semi-regular on a show called Benson and had had a terrible experience. He was not in control of that show, obviously. He had to say the words that had been written by other people.
George Shapiro's favorite part of the story of Benson is how I got fired, which was they neglected to tell me. They fired me from the show, and I just showed up Monday morning. I went to my chair where the table reading was held, and there was no script. And I said, how come there's no... I didn't get a script this week. And someone had to call me aside and say, because you're not on the show anymore.
After that first meeting in this office, Jerry went back to New York.
That place over there, it says Prince Properties. That used to be Catch a Rising Star, legendary New York comedy club, where I used to work and Larry used to work, and we were standing in the bar. And I started telling him that NBC was talking to me about doing a TV show.
And would I be interested in working on it with him? And of course, I really didn't have anything going at the time, and I didn't have any money, and I said, sure, fine. We left Catch a Rising Star, and we walked into a Korean grocery store.
And we were getting something to eat and making fun of all these different items they have here.
And we started, as we invariably did, talking about some of the products in the store.
You know, there's always these things here like... here's some Korean ginseng royal jelly. Comes in a jelly now. So you can spread it.
It occurred to me that this is the kind of discussion that you never really hear on television. And that that would, in fact, would be funny.
And Larry said, this is what the show should be. I said, what? He said, just, you know, making fun of stuff. I go, yeah, that's the show. But that is what the show became.
I remember I had heard that Jerry had signed a development deal with NBC and that it was putting together a show. And actually, Larry David's now wife, Lori, and I, we sort of credit the two of them joining forces creatively because of a birthday party that I had.
And I needed to bring a birthday gift, and I didn't quite know what to get her. I didn't really have any money. And I thought, oh, I have a good gift. I'll write some stand-up material for her.
So it was my birthday, so I'd been having a few drinks, and I was kind of too drunk to read the material. So, you know, everybody said, oh, Jerry, you read it.
And I got big laughs reading this routine, and it was kind of the first time that I thought his material really works well with my voice, and maybe we would be a good team.
It was really very funny. And I don't know if that was some kind of connection with my writing and his performing, but if it was the first.
I was thinking about trying to get him to do this with me because he was the only person I knew that had ever written anything. He wrote a movie script, and I never knew a comedian that had written anything but, you know, an Airline Peanuts bit. So he had actually typed something out on a piece of paper. So he seemed like a writer to me. And I thought I should get myself, you know, a real writer. But somebody that I could relate to, somebody who had the same kind of bent.
We went to a diner, the Westway Diner, the next night.
And this is the exact booth that we were at. Actually, it isn't. It was the one over there, but there's two ladies there, so we couldn't get in there. But this is very similar to the booth that we were at. And we sat here at about, I don't know, probably 1 o'clock in the morning. We had both performed over at the Improv. And trying to figure, well, what could this show be where it's just, you know, nonsense and idiotic conversations.
It was going to be about how a comedian gets his material.
It was going to be a 90-minute special that was going to fill in for Saturday Night Live one weekend, one Saturday night when they were off.
We would follow Jerry around with one camera, not 3 cameras. Because it's a special after all. We're going to follow him around with one camera throughout a day or a couple of days or a week or whatever, and see what this comedian, Jerry Seinfeld, experienced during that week, and how what he experienced would eventually be formed into some stand-up material. And then at the end of the show, we would see him go on and do the material, and that was really what the show was. That was that initial special.
And I just didn't think that you could sustain that for 90 minutes. I thought maybe you could do it for 30 minutes. And that's how it became a TV series. It was going to be a special all the way. But I just didn't think we could last 90 minutes. So instead, we ended up making 90 hours.
Once the idea shifted from a special to a pilot, then I think the George character came on, because George / me, in a way.
After we got the idea of two guys talking, this was the idea. What if we had 2 guys talking? It was brilliant. Then George Shapiro suggested I meet with Rob Reiner at Castle Rock.
When they had the idea of doing essentially a conversational show, which was an extension of Jerry's act. I mean, Larry and Jerry shared such a great sensibility, and what was wonderful is you had this kind of curmudgeonly, misanthropic, dyspeptic Larry David being pushed through this very accessible, likable Jerry Seinfeld. Even though they did share their comic sensibilities, it was a marriage made in heaven.
At one point, when I asked the normal network questions like, well, who's going to be writing this with you, Jerry? Obviously, you have a strong voice, and we want that voice to be recognized. And you know, have you thought about a strong showrunner, someone who really knows what they're doing in the world of comedy television, weekly, episodic, series television, a strong creator, executive producer? And he said, Larry David. And for me, it was a loud and clear, who?
I started doing stand-up in New York in the late 70s. I came out to California in 1979 to do a television show called Fridays, which was sort of like a Saturday night clone show. And then no sooner was I back in New York than I got hired as a writer on Saturday Night Live. I wrote there for one season. I got one sketch on the air, which was on at 5 to 1 in the morning.
Larry David had been a writer on Saturday Night Live, had, as I understand it, a rather fractious relationship with the executive producer of the show.
And I quit in the middle of the season. I said, the show stinks, I'm leaving. And on the way home, I realized that I was costing myself a year to live on in salary. And my next door neighbor Kramer said, just go back and tell them that